Freddie Mercury grew up as an Anglo-Indian.
Neil and I weren't very close. When I was on holiday in Mexico, it was like, I was devastated.
What are some of the highlights of your musical career? I think playing on one of the biggest selling records of all time is a feather in one's cap.
I'm John Bowden from Rock History Music, and in this edition, it's musicians who risked a lot, sometimes everything, to get back on stage. In some cases, they couldn't because of the pain. My dad was a lumberjack, and it wasn't unheard of for him to go to the woods. We used to call it just go to the woods when he had to work, and basically work with pain, a lot of pain sometimes. Sports figures do it. Everyone does it. A plumber. As you get older, you're going to be playing with pain. Sometimes you have the luxury of being able to stop. Sometimes you just can't because of finances. And when it comes to music, sometimes it's not just finances. They can't stay away from the spotlight. That's good and bad. I mean, some people need it so badly. I mean, the adrenaline, if you've ever been on stage in front of 10,000 people, and through the years I've had to introduce bands in my 40 plus years in radio, where I'd be in front of 10,000 people and I'd go, this is wild. Even though I knew they weren't there to see me. So a lot of people can minimize the fact that, oh yeah, that, you know, they've got big egos and they don't want, but hey, for whatever reason, a lot of musicians got back on stage, whether they should or shouldn't, because that was their job. We have a lot of special guests in this video. A lot of people talking about the pain, a lot of their friends and cohorts and musicians who have played with these great artists. That's all coming up on Rock History Book. Meat Loaf. He was larger than life, an operatic rock performer, best known for his Bat Outta Hell trilogy and dramatic anthems like Paradise by the Dashboard Light and I'll Do Anything for Love, but I Won't Do That. But specifically, Bat Outta Hell 1, released October 21st, 1977, will not only be his biggest crowning achievement, but one of the biggest selling albums of all time. As of this taping, it has sold over 43 million albums worldwide. Produced by Todd Rundgren, and here's the gentleman who played bass, Kasim Sultan.
Jim and Meat Loaf got kicked out of Clive Davis's office. Clive said, you guys, you should go find something else to do in life because you are never going to be successful. And that's, Clive Davis, who, has a really good ear. To his credit, Todd heard something in that music that no one else or very few people did and took it and created something or helped create something. It was really Jim and Todd that really envisioned that record the way it is.
Behind the theatrical bravado was a man struggling with numerous health issues. He collapsed multiple times on stage due to exhaustion, heart issues, and a history of asthma. In 2003, he underwent heart surgery after collapsing again, and later suffered from chronic back problems and spinal issues that made touring increasingly difficult. Yet, he kept returning to the stage and the studio, fueled by sheer determination and a love for his fans. Even when his voice aged and his body weakened, he delivered emotionally charged performances that carried the same fire as his youth. He passed away in 2022, but left behind a legacy of bombast, heartache, and resilience that few could rival.
What are some of the highlights of your musical career? I think playing on one of the biggest selling records of all time is a feather in one's cap.
Squire of Yes. He was a founding member of that group and was known for creating a sound that was as intricate as it was grand.
Playing a guitar solo and having that Sherman tank sitting behind you, finessing if need be, but so powerful, so confident, and great choices of notes.
His melodic, overdriven bass lines on albums like Fragile, Close to the Edge, and Going for the One didn't just anchor the songs, they soared. Squire's playing redefined what a bass could do in progressive rock, and his harmonies with John Anderson were a crucial part of the band's signature sound. In 2015, Squire was diagnosed with acute erythroid leukemia, an aggressive and rare form of cancer. Within weeks, he announced a break from performing, the first time he had ever missed a Yes show in the band's nearly 5-decade history. He had played on every album and every tour up until that point, making him the group's most consistent member.
The last time I talked to him, he said, I can't wait to get out of here and get back on the road. and that was 3 days before he passed away.
We spoke a lot. I basically went to record him for the first Prog Collective record I made, and 6 weeks later he was gone. And we were speaking a lot inside of that period about the future, and you know, and he kept turning it around to yes and wanting yes to continue. And
Squire passed away just a few months later in June 2015. He was 67.
Even though we knew it was really bad, there wasn't this realization as yet, even with his wife, that he was about to just, part from her.
Turned around and looked up, and there was Chris, like there. And he was looking into this light, and tears going down his face, and it was Chris. And I woke up, and I said to Jane, my wife, I think I've just seen Chris. And within a couple of hours, we found out he passed away.
He said the worst thing he went through, I said, how are you feeling? Are you in pain? He said, the worst thing is I haven't slept for 2 weeks. He said, that's much worse than the pain. He said, the torture of literally, and I said, oh, no, Chris, I know. We've been up together for a couple of nights and trying to make a joke of it. And he said, no, I'm talking about literally no sleep for 2 weeks solid.
Although his illness took him quickly, his impact resonated deeply. Many fans didn't realize he had been battling health issues during Yes's latter tours. His commitment to music, even as his body was weakening, reflected his identity as the band's steady core. Chris Squire didn't just play the bass. He reshaped its role in rock, and he did it with courage until the very end. Peter Frampton, the guitar virtuoso behind Frampton Comes Alive, one of the greatest albums of all time, live and otherwise. The record thrilled audiences with hits like Baby I Love Your Way and Show Me the Way. But in 2019, he revealed that he had been diagnosed with inclusive body myositis, or IBM, a rare degenerative muscle disease that causes progressive weakness, especially in the arms and legs. Knowing the clock was ticking on his ability to perform, Frampton launched a farewell tour that same year, and his guitar playing was remarkably sharp despite his illness. He also recorded a blues album, All Blues, which hit number 1 on the Billboard Blues charts. In 2023, though he was weakening, Frampton surprised fans by announcing he'd continue touring while he still could. The image of Frampton seated yet pouring his soul into each note really resonated with fans. His courage to face a degenerative condition with creativity and grace only reinforced his legendary status in the rock canon. Bret Michaels, he was the flamboyant frontman of Poison, known for glam metal anthems like Every Rose Has Its Thorn and Talk Dirty to Me. This man has faced numerous health issues throughout his life. Diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 6, Michaels has always had to balance life on the road with managing his condition. In 2010, things took a dramatic turn when he suffered a brain hemorrhage and was rushed to emergency surgery. At that time, doctors gave him slim odds of survival, but Michaels not only recovered, he returned to the stage within months. His resilience, interestingly, became part of his brand. He also underwent an emergency appendectomy and was later diagnosed with a hole in his heart. Now, despite these compounding medical issues, Michaels continued touring, releasing solo material, and appearing in the reality show Rock of Love and Celebrity Apprentice, which, by the way, he won. His life has been one of defying odds. And through every health scare, of course, he always remained charismatic, leather-clad, and forced to rock and roll. Freddie Mercury, not just a rock star. He was a phenomenon. The Queen frontman redefined what it meant to be a lead singer. Flamboyant, fearless, wildly talented, with a voice that could shake the heavens, something he's probably doing.
Freddie Mercury grew up as an Anglo-Indian. His family, came out of India, etc., or Persia and then India.
In general, he didn't talk about his family. He didn't talk about his upbringing. I heard, my mother playing these kind of records, and so I listened to them. So it was kind of mysterious. I mean, it gave him an aura of mystery, which maybe part of that was deliberate. When he became Freddie, he just stayed Freddie Bulsara, and then eventually he added the Mercury, and that was kind of like his new persona. But, despite the flamboyance, certainly in the songs, I think, there's often an underlying sadness. And I wonder how much of that may have come from his upbringing, because his parents sent him off to boarding school in India. He would go months without seeing his family. For years, he only saw his parents about 2-3 months out of the year, because the rest of the time he was in school in India. He did say about boarding school, it taught him to fend for himself. He was teased a bit because of his buck teeth in front. He had extra back teeth, so that made his front teeth protrude. It was there that he got the name Freddie. And he joined a school band. So, he had friends there. He wasn't this totally isolated person. But I do think that probably made a great impact on him. And if you look in those early years of Queen, he's always the one saying, yes, we're not just going to be successful, we're going to be stars. And he's always the one pushing them.
Behind the glittering stage persona was a man quietly fighting one of the most devastating diseases of his time. In the mid-1980s, Mercury was diagnosed with HIV, which progressed to full-blown AIDS, a death sentence in those days. He chose to keep his diagnosis private, even from many of his close friends and collaborators. Despite his failing health, Mercury pushed forward with Queen, recording what would become his final albums, The Miracle in 1989 and Innuendo 2 years later. The latter featured The Show Must Go On, a haunting anthem of defiance recorded when Mercury could barely stand, let alone sing. Yet he delivered a vocal performance that still sends chills down spines. Just 24 hours after publicly confirming he had AIDS, Mercury passed away on November 24th, 1991. Obviously, his death was a shock to the world, but his decision to keep creating until his final breath turned his last recordings into a powerful and enduring statement. He didn't just go out on his own terms. He turned his farewell into art. Neil Peart of Rush. This guy wasn't just a drummer. He was an architect of rhythm and thought. As the percussionist and lyricist for Rush, he built a sprawling sonic landscape and crafted deeply philosophical lyrics that challenged and inspired generations. But in 2016, after retiring from touring the year before, Peart was diagnosed with glioblastoma, an aggressive and often terminal brain cancer. The news wasn't made public until after his death in 2020. Known for being intensely private, Peart quietly endured the illness for over 3 years while remaining out of the spotlight.
He just told a very small number of people and begged them, please don't tell anybody. And they did. They carried that burden for him. For the other guys in the band, and I'm sure it's the same for everybody who is kind of sworn to secrecy on this, that carrying that around, but not being able to say anything about it, that had to have some kind of very painful, very traumatic effect on these people.
I didn't know. I'd heard rumors he wasn't well, but nobody said too much. So okay.
Neil was not the kind of guy that wanted to live a public kind of life. He didn't even like doing interviews, and he didn't like going to meet and greets. He didn't like any of that stuff,
Though he didn't return to performance after his diagnosis, he left the world with Rush's R40 Live Tour, an unknowing farewell that was emotionally profound in retrospect. His bandmates Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson shared how Neil accepted his fate with incredible bravery and grace. Throughout his life, Peart faced loss, including the death of his daughter and his wife in the late 90s.
The car accident that Neil's daughter had, and when his wife had cancer. That's just a lot. And those guys really emphasized their privacy and their commitment to each other in this very quiet, dignified way.
Yeah, I think he was a private kind of a man, and so I think it made it so that Rush realized, well, we have to respect that. That's 33 1/3 of what we're about,
And his returning to music with renewed purpose. In his final years, though out of view, he remained a symbol of resilience and intellect. His drumming was thunderous, but it was the quiet way in which he faced his mortality that made his final chapter even more powerful.
Neil and I weren't very close. When I was on holiday in Mexico, it was I was devastated.
Right after Neil died, there were all these drummers calling and saying, "Can I be in Rush?" That to me is the record scratch abrupt. No, don't do that.
It's what? This is not possible. And I spoke to the guys, and of course they were extremely apologetic and said they were sworn to secrecy and they just couldn't say anything. And I understand. That was Neil.
Now that the Rush thing is done, I think both Geddy and Alex, they've kind of relaxed in a way that when Neil was part of it, they couldn't relax because Neil was not a relaxing kind of guy. Neil was wired in a certain way that he...
Lou Reed, the provocative poet of Velvet Underground, and later revered solo artist, battled liver disease in his final years of his life. Known for tracks like Walk on the Wild Side and Berlin, Reed had long dealt with the physical toll of addiction and a hard rock lifestyle. In 2013, he underwent a liver transplant, which gave him brief reprieve. During this time, he continued to work on music and wrote about Tai Chi and spiritual reflection. His final public appearances were marked with frailty, but he remained sharp and uncompromising. Reed passed away later that year, but his final writings and the tones of his latter work revealed an artist who, even when physically diminished, remained intellectually and emotionally powerful. He could be an incredibly strong personality. Some people liked Lou Reed personally and others not so much. His legacy was never about sweetness. It was about truth. No matter how brutal, and even as he faced death, he remained true to that ethos. Christine McVie of Fleetwood Mac. She was the emotional anchor of that band, bringing warmth and depth to songs like Songbird, You Make Love and Fun, and Everywhere. She was more or less in most of the parts of Fleetwood Mac. For much of her career, McVie played the role of the calm within the band's stormy history. In later years, she stepped back from the spotlight, returning to Fleetwood Mac in 2014 after a long hiatus. Her return brought a sense of completeness to the band's lineup. She continued touring until 2019, but her health was quietly deteriorating. She passed away in 2022 following what was described as a short illness. In the beginning with Fleetwood Mac, she just joined as a session player in '68, and her first compositions started to appear on their fifth album, Future Games. She was in the band during the Bob Welch era of 5 albums, and as the band had many different personalities, by 1975, Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks joined the group and were featured for the first time in 1975 on the self-titled album that's sometimes nicknamed, and though Beatles fans don't like this, the White Album, with hits like Over My Head, Warm Ways, Rhiannon, and Say You Love Me. Fleetwood Mac's biggest album, of course, came in 1977 with Rumors, one of the most popular albums of all time, featuring Go Your Own Way, Dreams, Don't Stop, and You Make Love and Fun. Her poise and presence on stage, even in the final years, were undiminished. Christine McVie's contributions to the band were never flashy, but they were vital, enduring, and full of grace. Mick Mars of Mötley Crüe. He was the notoriously silent but blistering guitarist of Mötley Crüe. He spent decades shredding stadiums while hiding a painful secret. He suffered from ankylosing spondylitis, a rare form of arthritis that causes spinal vertebrae to fuse over time. Diagnosed at just 17, Mars battled from chronic pain for most of his career. Even as his band climbed to glam metal superstardom, with albums like Shout at the Devil, Dr. Feelgood, and Girls, 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 the condition worsened over the years, affecting his posture and mobility, and forcing him to perform while nearly immobile on stage. Yet he soldiered on, rarely missing a show, and never letting up on the ferocity of his playing. In 2022, Mars officially retired from touring with Mötley Crüe, citing his worsening condition, but announced plans to release solo material. His battles weren't always visible, even though he seemed frail, but it was relentless. Mick Mars didn't just fight pain, he played through it, delivering decades of face-melting riffs and proving that resilience can be just as heavy as metal. Rick Wright of Pink Floyd, the keyboardist of one of the greatest rock bands of all time. He was certainly the group's most understated member, but also its emotional backbone. His haunting melodies on albums like Wish You Were Here, Dark Side of the Moon, and The Division Bell helped shape the band's ethereal, cerebral sound. In the mid-2000s, Wright began quietly battling cancer, reportedly a fast-moving, aggressive type. Though the specifics were never disclosed publicly, he was incredibly private. He continued to make music during this time, including a notable performance with David Gilmour in 2006 that would be his last public appearance. His final contribution was from that same year on Gilmour's solo album On an Island, where his signature keyboard textures brought a nostalgic echo of that classic Floyd sound. Sure, there's always been debates between Roger Waters, who usually wins the debate via Pink Floyd fans, as being the main source of inspiration for the big albums from Pink Floyd, to David Gilmour, whose angelic voice and thunderous, exceptional guitar work kind of created that sound. But would there be a Pink Floyd that's that popular without Rick Wright?
David Gilmour announcing the band members, and he announces Richard Wright, and in every single show, standing ovation. I'm not kidding you, at least 8 minutes. The appreciation from fans for Richard Wright, who actually get Richard Wright.
His influence declined as the band went on. certainly. If you look at what he plays on Piper, for example, the man was an extremely talented multi-instrumentalist, playing things from, I think, the oboe to the cello to the incredible range of instruments. He, like Mason, his instinct was to serve a song. So, he wasn't doing flashy stuff, although when you look at technically what he was doing, there's a lot of modes and scales that he's bringing in from jazz.
Rick Wright passed away in 2008. He was only 65, but his decision to keep creating while he was suffering with his illness, free of fanfare or drama, reflected, of course, a quiet dignity in this man. He didn't need the spotlight to make magic, just a few well-placed notes. Remember, if you want to subscribe to the channel, we'd love that. Click the bell notification. Don't miss anything, but it's important if you want to help the channel. Join our Patreon. It's just $6 and change, and you get access to hundreds of videos that I've not even put on YouTube yet. Hundreds. If you want a rock history book or rock history music hat, cap, jacket, or T-top, they're available. And if you want to make a donation, there's a link to PayPal at the very top of every one of our channels in the description. Share our videos, comment on them, and like them. I'm John Bowden. This is Rock History Book.